Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Govea. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, my friends, we are jumping right in. Let's take a look at the court docket because, yes, we wanted to do a refresh right here in real time. We know, and we are going to get into this story in great detail, but we do know that the judge in the search warrant case out of Mar-a-Lago said that the unsealing would have to happen tomorrow, and we're going to go through this today, but I wanted to make sure that they didn't just drop this while we were preparing for the show, and it doesn't look like it has been dropped. So the order granting the motion to unseal, they said on or before Friday, August 26, which is tomorrow. They've got to actually post the redacted affidavit, but I was thinking that maybe if we got lucky, they would bring this, they would actually drop it today. They would release it today, but doesn't look like that is here, not at least for the broadcast. And so we still have to attend to that story, of course. And so you can see here over on our show notes mind map that we're going to be dealing with the order from the judge demanding that this be unsealed now. And the U.S. government prosecutors, of course, are going to comply. They've got a deadline to do that by tomorrow. And so we've got a little snippet from the court docket. You can see there's that docket entry that says sealed. You see that sort of sealed, restricted. So that means, well, we should presumably see that unsealed, or the government is going to file a separate motion tomorrow. And I think that is actually the motion of filing it under seal. And so we're going to see all of that change, but we'll talk about that. We've got the order to unseal that came out from the court. The media really wants to see this unsealed as well. They want to see the briefing unsealed, not even just the affidavit, but the sealed brief, right? They want to see the justification proffered forward by the government. Donald Trump responded to a lot of this over on True Social, so we'll check him out. And there's a new story about Judicial Watch. Tom Fitton over there apparently may have had Trump's ear. They may have sort of been having conversations about these records. Judicial Watch, we've talked a lot about them. That was the same organization that really sort of had that groundbreaking case with the Clinton sock drawer tapes. So we'll talk about that. And we'll check back in on the court docket to see if there was, in fact, any new affidavit drops before we sort of move on. But a lot of Trump news. Now, similarly, very interesting story came out today that, you know, in our system of justice that has two different tiers, we have sort of this prosecution of Donald Trump, and we have this interesting sort of parallel set of cases, one involving Hunter Biden, which is the president's son, and another one involving Ashley Biden, which is the president's daughter. We've got two stories about the Biden kids today. So the first one is the DOJ and the FBI are apparently confirming that her diary is real. Remember this diary story with Ashley Biden. Apparently Joe Biden and Ashley, you know, when they were younger, showers or I don't know what the heck was in the diaries, right? But the point is somebody moved into an apartment, they got the diary, they turned the diaries over to Project Veritas, and then the people who actually got their hands on those diaries just pled guilty today. What? To conspiracy to commit interstate transportation of stolen property. And for a long time, we're all sitting around going, you said that Ashley Biden diary story was all a bunch of fake news, right? It wasn't real. You weren't confirming or denying it or anything like that. But if we have actual convictions now, they're not pleading guilty to fictional diaries. So it must kind of be the real thing, right? Well, we'll take a look at it. There was an information, meaning they sort of were going to charge him and they just sort of wrapped this all up. They showed up. Here's what you're charged with. Plead guilty. That's it, right? Close in and out. And the New York Times is reporting that this may put Project Veritas in sort of the crosshairs. These two people pleading guilty might open the door for more of this as the Biden prosecutors just, continue their wreckage all across America. And then we have a very interesting letter that came out today. Two interesting little things to talk about regarding Hunter Biden. Ron Johnson, who is a senator, he wrote this letter over to the FBI. We are going to dissect it. And he's saying, we have whistleblowers that are now coming out to my office, and they are saying specifically that the FBI agents were encouraging or, incentivizing or persuading certain people to push the Hunter Biden saga story back to after the election. Now, this was one of those things that we all speculated was true, obviously, but it's sort of now, people are coming out and they're telling, hey, Senator, yeah, specifically that happened. And Facebook today, the founder Meta, this guy, Mark Zuckerberg, oh gosh, he was on the Joe Rogan show and they talked about the Hunter Biden laptop story. And so we'll read a little bit of that conversation. Mark Zuckerberg saying specifically that the FBI came to him and they sort of were putting pressure on him to hush that story up. So we just live in a joke of a country, don't we? Oh my gosh. So we've got a lot to get to, my friends. And if you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We have an amazing community of people over there. Shout outs to John McGarvey. John McGarvey also, he's a member on Locals. He also sent in a super chat. And he was saying today, he says, I heard they're going to use the document, talking about the Trump warrant affidavit. He says, I heard they're going to use the document to show support for BLM with the black box. Get it? All the redactions showing support for BLM. That's John McGarvey's comment. So shout out to John McGarvey. And we got Bonnie Specs over there on Locals, Jason on Blast in California, JC the Music Man, Savvy Sue, Zach Nichols, Look 2G. The whole crew is over there chatting away. We also see our friends over on Rumble. We've got Blue Peon. We've got Annie Get Your Gun. Candy Gas is over there. Shout out to Rick 2020, Donald Trump, Nexit 2020, and Cat Crap Fever as well. And our friends on YouTube, our YouTube members are Patrick Parker. Shout out to John Doodle. Paul Mino is in the house. Shout out to Paul. Catherine Smith, a member there. Shout out to Lean, who's in the house, who's modding down the fort. And I saw a beautiful conversation, Lean, earlier with you. And I'm just grateful that you're here and a part of our community, Lean. Very appreciative that you're here. I really do mean that. Holy F, my S stinks. K Bean's in the house, along with Playin' Hooky and many others. And so, my friends, those are our tremendous members. And by the way, if you're on YouTube, we have by popular request, we have the Binger GIF that's now available for members. So you can use that one. That came in yesterday. Thomas Bingy Binger, he was from the Kyle Rittenhouse saga. Remember him? So we've got that member. That's available for YouTube members. You can drop those GIFs in there. And then we also have, of course, my law firm. Safety, clarity, and hope is what we do on a daily basis at the R&R Law Group. We're located in Scottsdale, Arizona. We love to help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope. We have an amazing team. We're working on some very cool stuff right now. And we really appreciate your referrals. 480-787-0394. All right. And now let's get into the business, shall we? So what I would like to start with, of course, is the big news of the day, the Donald Trump affidavit and the judge ordering it unsealed. And so let's get it all queued up. The Trump Mar-a-Lago raid saga continues on. The judge today ordering that the Justice Department submit a redacted affidavit and that it be unsealed so that America can actually see what's going on. Trump, of course, has long been demanding this, and now it is coming to fruition. And so today we're going to take a look at several parts of this story. We've got, of course, the court docket. And as we learned previously from the docket, you can see several entries came about on August 25th. Two of these. System entry, docket 88, restricted and sealed until further notice. And another one highlighted here, docket entry 89, restricted and sealed until further notice. And then the rest of this stuff is sort of appeals and so on. Right? But this was the redacted version that the prosecutors submitted into the court. And they said, look, Judge, this is our proposal. This is what we think is reasonable here. And they were sort of encouraging the judge many times over to not make this public. Remember, Merrick Garland said Trump started making all this public, but if he started it, then we're okay continuing it until it came to the affidavit. Then suddenly they're like, pump the brakes. They threw it in reverse and they said, don't you even think about unsealing this because it's going to lead to people finding out more about our investigation. They're going to know exactly how we investigated Trump and know the witnesses and know the names and so on. So there was a big back and forth, and Judicial Watch and others were arguing, saying, hey, we have a presumption of access here. We sort of have the right to see this stuff. We still live in America, right? Sort of. And so we are taking a look now. The judge, right, submitted argument or required arguments from both sides, had oral arguments on it, and then today issued this order to unseal. And I want to just reference this. You see here it says ECF number 89. This references the redactions from the search warrant affidavit, the same entry that we just saw right there. You see that right there, entry 89. So he says, okay, listen, America, let's pull this up. Here's the judge. The order to unseal from the Trump warrant judge who signed off on the warrant that allowed the FBI to raid his residence at Mar-a-Lago. The order to unseal is 2 pages, very short document. Judge Reinhart tells America, he says, I have reviewed the government's memorandum of law and the proposed redactions to the search warrant affidavit. And he did this quickly, like they just submitted those documents in docket entry 89, right there that he's referencing, and he's already got this order ready to go. He says, I am fully advised in the entire record, including the contents of the affidavit. Obviously, I read it before I signed off and approved the warrant. And he says the following. Number 1, I find that the government has met its burden of showing a compelling reason and good cause to seal portions of the affidavit because disclosure would reveal, number 1, identities of witnesses, law enforcement agencies, and uncharged parties. And number 2, the investigation strategy, direction, scope, sources, and methods would also be disclosed if I unsealed it. And number 3, grand jury information protected by the federal rules of criminal procedure would also be revealed. And previously on this show, we've talked about the different indicia, the balancing factors. And so the court has gone through this many times before and said, okay, if we talk about privacy, we're going to weigh that. Okay, that's in favor of the government. And this one's in favor of Trump and so on. Now finding that many of these are in favor of the government. As further explanation for this finding, I incorporate my reference on my order on motions to unseal, ECF number 80, which is where he really went through that entire litany of the indicia, all the different elements. He says, see also this 11th Circuit case from 1986 if you want some more information on it. And he gives us some detail. He says, look, findings must be sufficient for a reviewing court to be able to determine in conjunction with a review of the sealed documents themselves what important interests the district court found sufficiently compelling to justify the denial of public access. Number 2, he writes, Judge Reinhart says, based on my independent review of the affidavit, the actual probable cause statement that was drafted by the FBI, he says, I further find that the government has met its burden of showing that its proposed redactions are narrowly tailored to serve the government's legitimate interest in the integrity of the ongoing investigation and are the least onerous alternative to sealing the entire affidavit. Because remember, there's 2 layers to this analysis. One, we have to go through the indicia and talk about privacy rights and government prosecution rights and public access rights and all of those things. But if there is another mechanism by which to sort of accomplish the ends, we have to actually say, look, if we are going to seal some of this, it's got to be the least restrictive thing and it has to be necessary to do it. And the judge said it is. So finding that, yeah, it should be redacted and finding that the redactions are appropriate as written, right? As on the document says they all match. So he says, therefore, it's ordered that the intervenors, so this would be the media, okay, this is Judicial Watch, ABC, WAPO, New York Times, all these people, their motion to unseal is granted in part. Why? Because it is going to be unsealed, right? The government wanted the entire thing to not be unsealed at all. So it will be unsealed. It's going to be covered out in black redaction boxes, right? Probably not going to see much on there, but at least it's going to be granted in part because we're actually going to see something called affidavit with a bunch of redactions on it. So he says, yeah, we're going to grant it in part. It's not a huge victory depending on the redactions, but we'll see. So the deadline comes, the judge says, on or before noon Eastern time, Friday, August 26. The government shall file in the public docket a version of the affidavit containing the redactions proposed in ECF 89.1, which was what I showed you previously. That was filed under seal, so it sounds like they're just going to refile a new one, and it should more or less match that. Done and ordered in chambers this 25th of August, 2022, West Palm Beach, Florida. Bruce Reinhart, magistrate judge out of the District of Florida. So we can see that that is the actual order. Now, we were looking to see if the redacted affidavit was going to be filed, but it's looking like it has not hit the docket yet. Government prosecutors are still going to be assembling that, and it's got to hit the docket by tomorrow noon Eastern. In the meantime, remember that when they filed that, they also filed it with sort of a memo, a justification for why the different redactions are necessary, right? Not only did they file the affidavit with the redactions, but they also filed an explanation. saying each one of these redactions is necessary because. And so we want to see that too. We want to know what their explanation for all of this was. So as you can see, another sort of big docket entry that hit the docket today in the Trump Mar-a-Lago search warrant case. He's got two cases that are going on. One's the search warrant case. One is his complaint against the government for a breach of his constitutional rights. But here on August 25th, look at this one filed by all of the media companies. Here it is again. The Associated Press, Dow Jones, Times Publishing Company, EW Scripps, McClatchy, NBC News. We got the Washington Post, CBS, New York Times, all of them all submitted this motion. It's a motion to unseal portions of the government's brief addressing the redactions. So again, the media, all of them are like crashing in here, and they're making very good arguments for Donald Trump. They want to see not only the affidavit, but the accompanying memo, the brief that explains the redactions. They say that the public needs to see this stuff, and all versions of sealed documents should be basically presented to us. So let's take a quick look at that motion as well, which I believe I have not pulled up, but I will do that now. This is the media's request, and the media, right, is that sort of conglomeration of all of these entities. So let's get our red pen out and we'll read what they're saying. They say, look, we just don't want the affidavit. We want the justification for the affidavit as well. 4 pages. It is the sealed search warrant, and this is the media, the intervenors, like their motion to unseal portions of the government's brief addressing the redactions to the search warrant affidavit and for public filing of the redacted versions of all the sealed documents. And it's everybody, right? It's everybody that I just listed. They say, WAPO, New York Times, ABC, blah, blah, blah. We hereby move for an order, number 1, unsealing portions of the government's brief that was in 88, right? So 2 things got filed. Addressing the redactions to the affidavit of probable cause submitted in connection with the search warrant on August 8th at Trump's residence in Mar-a-Lago. We want to see what your explanation was here, not just the affidavit, because there's a lot you can glean from that, right? There's a lot you can say, oh, right? You want to know, okay, this paragraph was redacted, but why? Right? The paragraph tells you a lot, but an explanation about why you don't want that seen also tells you something. So the media wants to see it. And number 2, they're saying, Judge, can you please direct the government going forward to file a public redacted version of any sealed filings simultaneously with the sealed version? So let's just ease this whole thing up a little bit. Remember when we went through this with the GM-JE case many times? What would happen is GM would file a bunch of lawsuits, and they would go through this motions, and then it would go through this process where they'd say, okay, we have to file it under seal. The judge would say, what's in the motions? And they'd have sort of additional conferences or deadlines to propose redactions before the actual unredacted motions would hit the public dockets. And it took forever. I mean, we were like reading motions like 60 days after they were actually argued. It was the most annoying thing ever. So what they're saying here is, can you just do it like simultaneously so we don't have to go through that stinking process? They say lawyers for Washington Post, CNN, NBC News, Scripps, AP, and others, they all conferred with the government regarding these requests August 24th and 25th, and was advised that the government does not oppose the filing of this motion. Very good. We'll see. Now, the argument, they say, like the search warrant affidavit itself, the brief is a judicial record to which the presumption of public access applies. Court has already gone through this. They say, yeah, look, an unprecedented search, right? They put that in here. There is intense public interest and historical interest in an unprecedented search of the former president's residence. Yeah. And the government bears the burden of demonstrating that a sufficiently important interest in secrecy justifies the sealing. At the same time, the court has recognized the government's interest in protecting the integrity and the secrecy of the ongoing criminal investigation, and the media intervenors are sensitive to the balancing of interest required by this court. But that being said, Judge, they say, that said, to the extent that some of the portions of the brief could be made available to the public without jeopardizing the investigation, the government should be required to file a redacted version of the brief with those portions unsealed. Furthermore, and to avoid unnecessary motion practice in the future where we have to go, redact it, file, have a redaction deadline, and then, submit it again and again and again. They say, we just respectfully request that the court direct the government to file a public redacted version of any document filed under seal in this matter simultaneously with the sealed version. All right. We don't want to have to fight over this every time. As this court has also recognized, there is little interest in maintaining secrecy with respect to the facts about the investigation that the government has already publicly confirmed to be accurate. One of the leakiest investigations that's ever happened. I mean, every day there's a new New York Times story. We're going to talk about one of them today. Many confirmed facts about the investigation into Trump's handling of records have already been made available to the public, including through warrant materials already unsealed in this matter. Attorney General Merrick Garland came out and he was yapping from a press conference when he says, I personally approve this. And statements and materials released by the National Archives and records have already corroborated a lot of this as well. Additionally, public statements by Trump in his pending motion for judicial oversight, which is in the companion case and elsewhere, disclose events that may be recounted in the government's brief. In other words, why do you need to keep all this secret? It's already been published. It's out all over the place. At minimum, any portions of the brief that recite those facts about the investigation without revealing additional ones not yet publicly made available, and in addition to any other portions that pose no threat to the investigation, should be unsealed. If and when they write additional facts come to light and are confirmed to be accurate, or certain facts no longer pose a threat to the investigation, then there is no justification for maintaining them under seal either. Furthermore, any legal arguments in the government's filing should be made public, even if some of the facts of the government recounts remain under seal. And they conclude the following. They say, the media intervenors respectfully request that the court enter an order, number one, unsealing portions of the government's brief, and number two, directing the government to going forward, to file a public redacted version of anything that they file under seal so we can see at least a little bit about what they're filing. Submitted by lawyers for the media. You can see they've got several different attorneys here. Carol Jean Lowe Cicero. She's hailing from Florida. This guy, Charles Tobin, is over out of D.C. We've got Elizabeth Seiden-Bernstein out of Pennsylvania and somebody else out of Florida. A lot of attorneys all over the place. You would expect that, right? Lawyers for the Palm Beach Post. This guy's Dow Jones, ABC, WB, NBC News, CBS, New York Times, all crashing in there because it is Trump. And they love them some Trump, and they want to see what are in those briefs and the affidavits. Now, Donald Trump, very active on Truth Social, and he had several things to say about these recent developments. And so we're going to check in with the former president over on Truth Social. And of course, if you want to follow yours truly, I am available over there. And so, as I said, Trump was very active today. So let's sort of scroll down and see what he's got. Oh, he's posting the Scott Adams quiz. Yes. All right. So he is, well, let me just cue this up so that I don't have to, blind everybody with all the scrolling here. This is Trump, who posted this morning. And here he is. He says, America. Trump writes, even though I am as innocent as a person can be, and despite my campaign being spied on by the radical left, the FISA court being lied to and defrauded, all of the many hoaxes and scams that were illegally placed on me by very sick and demented people, and without even mentioning the many crimes of Joe and Hunter Biden, which we are going to get to, all revealed in great detail from the laptop from hell, it looks like more fake news media is pushing hard for the sleaze to do something that should not be done. And so, right, Donald Trump is calling out the double standards, massive double standards that exist. Previously, we talked about Joe Biden responding to Peter Doocy when he was asked about what he knew about the Donald Trump raid at his residence in Mar-a-Lago. And he said, I know nothing about it. Zero, he said. Trump responds. He says, Joe Biden said he knew nothing about the break-in of Mar-a-Lago or the greatest political attack in the history of the U.S. Does anybody really believe this? No, obviously not, right? That's ridiculous because that would mean that Merrick Garland is sort of just prosecuting Biden's political enemies without his knowledge of that, which seems like a weird thing to have your Department of Justice doing if you are the president, but okay. Donald Trump also writes, he says, the radical left Democrat prosecutors are illegally trying to circumvent, for purely political gain, the Presidential Records Act, which we've talked a lot about, under which I have done absolutely nothing wrong. It cannot be circumvented for me or any other president. They illegally raided my home and took things that should not have been taken. They even broke into my safe, an unthinkable act. That is from Donald Trump. And then his next post is just Presidential Records Act. Ah! And he's exclamation point. And he's dead right. We spent a lot of time talking about the Presidential Records Act. That was the same act that Judicial Watch lost to Judge Amy Berman when he was trying to get Tom Fitton and his organization records about Bill Clinton. And the judge said, it's the president. They've got Presidential Records Act authority. And Trump is referencing that. He also says the Justice Department and the FBI are leaking at levels never seen before. And I did nothing wrong. And this is true, right? We talked about this on our morning walk and talk, which our members get, whether you're on YouTube or on Locals. But the idea is that Merrick Garland is telling us that he's only speaking through his court filings and that he has an obligation to uphold the integrity of the Justice Department, while simultaneously every day there's a new story in the New York Times. There's a new leak everywhere you go. Donald Trump also posted this on August 25th, a statement by Trump about Joe Biden waiving student loans, canceling tens of thousands of dollars in payments for many Americans. Trump says Joe Biden and the radical left Democrats have just orchestrated another election and enhancing money grab, this time to the tune of $300 billion. And just like I predicted, it's coming right out of the pocket of the working class Americans who are struggling the most. Crippling inflation, unaffordable energy prices, and war. All things that should never have happened. But if it wasn't enough, now Americans are bailing out college administrators who fleece students and those who opted for degrees there was no way they could even afford. America is a nation in decline, and the cliff into oblivion is within sight. Stop voting for Democrats. Make America great again. Donald Trump on True Social. And you can go follow him over there at Real Donald Trump. And so he's asking the same questions that many of us are asking. A lot of issues with the Presidential Records Act. And we spent a lot of time talking about those. In particular, when we mentioned Judicial Watch and Tom Fitton and their conversation about this when they filed lawsuits and Freedom of Information Act requests to obtain individual presidential records. Now, an interesting story came out from CNN, and they're saying that maybe there was this sort of relationship between Donald Trump and Judicial Watch. They tell us over here from CNN, they say, not long after the National Archives got those boxes, they say Trump began taking calls from Tom Fitton over there at Judicial Watch, a prominent conservative activist. Fitton, a longtime head of a legal activist group, Judicial Watch, had a simple message for Trump. It was a mistake to give the records to the archives, and his team should have never let the archives strong-arm him into returning them, according to sources familiar with the matter. Those records belong to Trump, Fitton argued, citing a 2012 court case involving his organization that he said gave the former president authority to do what he wanted with records from his own term in office. That's the Clinton sock drawer case. That's Judge Amy Berman's ruling on this. The Judicial Watch president suggested to Trump that if the archives came back, he should not give up any additional records, according to sources with knowledge of their conversations. None of this has been previously reported. Now, they say while Trump continued to publicly tout his cooperation with the archives, privately, the former president began obsessing, they say, over Fitton's arguments, complaining to aides about the boxes that were previously handed over. Trump even asked Fitton at one point to brief his attorneys. Somebody said the moment Tom got in the boss's ear, it was downhill from there, they said with anonymity. In a phone interview, Fitton would neither confirm nor deny the conversations he's had with Trump, but noted that, he's been vocal on social media and television saying Trump did have the right to keep his documents because he took them with him at the end of his presidency. Now, Tom Fitton made that argument in his lawsuit, or actually, he said he should get access to the records, but the lawyer and the judge in the lawsuit said that he was wrong, said that Clinton actually had total deference, and they had the ability to retain those documents and not disclose them. And so we see that the search warrant order has come out from the judge telling the government to file an unredacted or a redacted affidavit, unsealed, tomorrow. And we'll take a look and see when that comes out. Before we move on, let's do a quick refresh and just see if anything has hit the docket, shall we? We'll do a little bit of there it is. So you can see right now, the docket's certainly closed over there on the East Coast, but sometimes I want to see if there's any late filings. And we don't have anything really. This was the last order saying that things should be submitted by tomorrow. So the prosecutors will probably see that tomorrow by about 12 East Coast. So that's 9 o'clock here. So I probably won't be out before. Maybe I'll be out before a morning walk and talk. We'll see. But a lot more to follow there. Now, as Donald Trump continues to be prosecuted by the DOJ, we're also learning that some Biden kids are sort of victims of a crime or something is what they're telling us, because 2 additional people just got convicted. Florida residents plead guilty to a conspiracy involving, I think, Ashley Biden's diary, that thing that we're not supposed to talk about, that Project Veritas may have gotten, that may detail stories about Joe Biden and daughters and all sorts of terrible things. Well, we now have confirmation out from the actual DOJ, the Department of Justice. Here's what they posted August 25th, 2022 for immediate release for all of us. They say Florida residents plead guilty to conspiracy to commit interstate transportation of stolen property. That means the diary. The pleas come out following the filing of a criminal information, which we're going to go through. And they say that they stole property belonging to the immediate family member of a then former government official. Okay, at that moment in time, right, that's Joe Biden. Now, Damian Williams, he's this new he's kind of a woke prosecutor-ish type of guy out of the Southern District of New York. We learned a lot about him in the GM case. And he came out and he said, look, I'm announcing that 2 individuals, somebody by the name of Amy Harris and Robert Kurlander, pled guilty to conspiracy to commit interstate transportation of stolen property involving the theft of personal belongings of an immediate family member of a then former government official who was a candidate for national political office. That's Joe Biden. Harris and Kurlander pled guilty today in front of a judge. U.S. District Attorney Damian Williams said the following. He came out and he said, Harris and Kurlander stole personal property from an immediate family member of a candidate for national office. It's Joe Biden. They sold the property to an organization, I think that's Project Veritas, for $40,000 and even returned to take more of the victim's property when asked to do so. Harris and Kurlander sought to profit from their theft of another person's property. FBI Assistant Director Driscoll, he said, as they've admitted with today's pleas, the defendants conspired to steal an individual's property, which they subsequently sold to a third party and delivered across state lines. Wow. They really went after that. Have you ever had something stolen out of your house or your car? Like, I had gym bags stolen out of my car, right? Okay. Break a window, take your bag, jerks. But man, you lose a diary and you're the president's daughter. Woo, they go across state lines. They charge everybody with crimes. As a consequence of their actions, they now face punishment in the federal justice system for their crimes. I'd like to thank the Public Corruption Unit for diving into this. And as you're going to see, we have the full information. This is the case against both Amy Harris and Robert Kurlander. These 2 pleading guilty to conspiracy for apparently selling Ashley Biden's diary. We've got 1 count here, nothing too serious. It is a fairly significant document. It's 13 pages. Let's see what we can tease out of this. It says the U.S. attorney charges the following. We're going to learn about Amy Harris and Robert and how they got this diary. They say they knew that this belonged to an individual, the victim, that Harris and Kurlander knew was the immediate family member of a former government official and a political candidate. They call it Candidate 1. That's Biden. The victim had stored the property in a private residence in Florida, at which Harris and others were temporarily residing. Okay, so turns out Ashley Biden leaves the residence. Harris and others move in, temporarily residing. And they find the diary, but they don't give us a lot of details on that. They say after Harris stole the property, she enlisted Kurlander to help facilitate the sale. Harris and Kurlander met in with Hatton, employees of an organization named Mamaroneck in New York. During the meeting, Harris described the circumstances of how she obtained the property and provided the property to the organization. After the meeting, and at the organization's request, they returned to Florida to obtain more property in order to give it back to the organization. They later met with the organization employee in Florida, gave that employee more of the property, believing that the organization would then transport them and the property from Florida to New York. Ultimately, the organization paid Harris each $20,000. Big bucks for that diary. So they give us a little bit more detail on they call it the initial theft of the victim's property. They write, in or about the spring of 2020, the victim, which is Ashley, resided with a friend at the friend's residence. When the victim moved out of the residence on June 17, 2020, remember, this is all months up leading to the election, the friend gave the victim permission to store a significant number of personal items at the residence, which the victim did. So the victim stored in the residence, among other things, a handwritten journal containing highly personal entries, tax records, a digital camera, a digital storage card containing private family photos, a cell phone, books, clothing, and luggage. Woo! On or about June 19, 2020, 2 days after Ashley Biden moved out of the residence and stored the property there, the friend invited Amy Harris, the defendant, to temporarily stay in the same room of the residence that the victim had previously used. Is this like an Airbnb situation or something? While there, Harris discovered the property that the victim was storing at the residence. At the time, Harris knew that the victim was a member of the immediate Biden family. So she comes in, she's sort of staying in the same room and maybe opens up a closet and opens up a box. And they see something in there. On or about, and I'm getting a note over here from Blue PN over on Rumble, says Marco Polo, shout out to our friends over at Marco Polo, published everything except the pictures are published over there. Now, on or about August 19th, Amy Harris, the defendant, contacted Robert and the defendant and asked for his assistance in selling some of the property, including the journal, digital storage card, and the private family photographs. That same day, Kurlander texted Harris and saying, yeah, we're going to make an S-ton of money from selling this stuff. So on September 6th, and Amy and Harris, they get together. They attend a political fundraiser in Florida meant to help the campaign of a candidate number 2 who was running for office against candidate number 1. I wonder who that could be. Could that be Trump? Harris and Kurlander attended the fundraiser with the intent of showing the victim's stolen property to a campaign representative, hoping the campaign would purchase it. They texted Amy Harris. They say, on Sunday, you may have a chance to make so much money. These people are just so excited. By that time, Harris had stolen additional items belonging to the victim, responded saying, OMG, coming with stuff that neither one of us have seen or spoken about. I can't wait to show you what Mama has to bring to Papa. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's too good. What an amazing couple. Let's read that one more time. Okay, so Amy is sending this over to Robert. By the time Amy had stolen some additional items, she responded over to Robert. She says, OMG, coming with stuff that neither one of us have seen or spoken about, and added, I can't wait to show you what Mama has to bring Papa. On or about September 10th, 2020, a representative of Trump's campaign conveyed to Harris that the defendant's campaign was not interested in purchasing the property. Okay, Trump's people are like, we don't want that. Get that out of here. Trump, no way. Who do you think we are? The Clintons? No, get out of here. Get out of here. We're not Hillary over here. And they advised Harris and Kurlander to provide the items to the FBI, right? That's back when they thought that the FBI was maybe going to do something. So Kurlander texted Harris and they said, the campaign can't use it. Sorry, baby. We're not going to get rich tonight. They wanted to go to the FBI. There's no way that Trump can use this. It has to be done a different way. So they're just, and so Harris, then they say, look, later on or about September 10th, Robert Kurlander texted Amy. He says, I have a call with the organization today. I'm going to find a way for you to make some money with this. On or about that same day, Employee 1 instructed Amy and the defendants to use an encrypted application to talk to the organization. Thereafter, Kurlander used an application to send photographs to another organization. After receiving the photographs, the organization offered to pay for airfare, hotel, and car service to transport property from Florida to New York City. Now, you see where this is going, right? They're trying to connect this to the organization. They're saying, oh, the organization is paying for airfare. They're paying for hotel. They're paying for the car. They're being charged with conspiracy, which means that, this organization is almost helping facilitate a conspiracy, right? And they're doing it by transferring money. This is how they're going to try to overcome any First Amendment protections. They're going to try to say, right, a defense from Project Veritas or from whatever organization would be, we're journalists here. We have the First Amendment that allows us to take documents that are provided to us that are newsworthy and publish them. And we've got all sorts of privileges. And they're going to say, well, no, you're conspirators. You're criminals. You are paying for them to facilitate the transfer of these stolen goods, and that's not protected by privilege. They continue. They say the first interstate or transportation of the victim's stolen property is as follows. On or about September 12th, then, Harris and Kurlander, they flew to the organization on their expense from Florida to New Jersey with certain property, including the journal, digital camera, other digital storage cards containing private family photographs. Robert texted Amy, says, let's have fun and make some money. Harris liked the text message. They took a car service to a luxury hotel at the organization's expense. That evening, on or about September 12th, Amy and Robert, they met at a Manhattan hotel with employees of the organization, including employee 1 and an executive of the organization. At this meeting, Amy and Robert provided the property of Ashley Biden to the organization. Harris described how she obtained that property, disclosed that the victim had additional property stored in the residence, and explained that Harris had access to the residence. Harris's explanation to the organization during this meeting confirmed for Kurlander, Robert, that Amy had stolen the victim's property. So Robert is listening to her and says, okay, she stole it. She didn't find it. She stole it. Also, during the course of the meeting on September 12th and at a dinner the same evening, as well as during a conversation held within the week, employee 1 told Amy and Robert, the defendants, that employee 1 wanted Harris and Kurlander to get more property from Ashley over to the organization, in part as a means of authenticating the journal. How do we know it's even true? Can you bring something like that we can match this up with? And that the value of the items previously provided by Amy and Robert would increase if additional items were obtained. During the September 12th meeting, executive number 1, don't know who that is, agreed to make an initial payment of $10,000 for the property that they provided earlier in the day. 2 days later, and the day after Amy Harris and Robert Kurlander, the defendants, returned to Florida from New York and at the organization's expense, on or about September 14, 2020, Kurlander set out to plan to sell the victim's stolen property to the organization, texting Harris, I'm expecting that they're going to pay up to $100,000 each, maybe more. I made it so that $10,000 is not your only payment as it was written. And if this does turn into something good or blockbusting, then it'll get us more money. They, of course, come across as the nicest people in the world, but, their job is to pay the least, and they aren't your or my best friends. They are in a sketchy business here, and they're talking and taking what's literally a stolen diary and info, and they're trying to make a story that will ruin the victim's life and affect the election. And they write, she can easily be thinking all of her stuff is there and not even be concerned about it. We have to tread even more carefully, and this stuff needs to be gone through by us. If anything worthwhile, it needs to be turned over and must be out of that house, they say. So they're sort of detailing the conversation between the two. All right, and this is the pretext for why these people are pleading guilty. They're saying, look, you did all this stuff, right? This is the information of what the charges, the base of the charges are for. They write, after Amy Harris described the circumstances under which she got Ashley's property, and between September 13th and the 17th, employee number 1 from the organization asked Amy and Robert to return to the residence so that they could get more stuff that they haven't provided to the organization yet. Employee 1 also repeatedly informed Harris and Kurlander that he was working in consultation and at the direction of an executive at the organization, executive number 2, right? So who are they going after here? Who are these people? Executive 1 and 2 are going to be in their crosshairs. If they're, people like James O'Keefe, probably in the crosshairs. On or about September 17th, Robert Kurlander, the defendant, used an encryption application to text employee number 1 that removing the property and providing it to the organization was risky, and the organization should agree to pay them more money. He said, "We don't want to do more or anything else and give anything else until we have some consideration spelled out." Meaning, what kind of money, right? Consideration, what's that? "We are doing everything we say we will do. It's just not fair. We are taking huge risks. This isn't fair." Around the same time, Amy and Robert, the defendants and the organization, engaged in negotiations for additional payments for the property. Then on September 17th, Amy and Robert, they took more of the victim's property, including, among other things, tax documents, clothing, luggage, all with the intent of giving those over to the organization. Then on, again, that same day, employee 1 actually flew from New York to Florida to personally pick it up. Met with Amy and Robert, who had just stolen the property out of the residence. All 3 of them met in Florida, and Harris and Kurlander provided the items to employee number 1. Following day on the 18th, Kurlander met with the employee again in Florida and gave an additional bag of stuff over to them. They say Harris and Kurlander provided these items with the understanding that they were going to be transported from Florida to New York. So employee number 1 is in those crosshairs. The next day, on or about the 19th of September, employee 1 shipped the stolen property from Florida to New York. Then we fast forward September and October 2020, and consistent with the encrypted messages, the organization paid Amy and Robert a total of $40,000. September 18th, org paid out $10,000 to a representative of Harris. On October 21, $20,000 goes over to Robert, and then another $10,000 on October 24th goes over to Harris. Both a little richer. And if they had student loans, they got another 10. In or about September 20th, in the Southern District of New York, they say that they committed the crime of conspiring to transport stolen property. It was part of a common scheme or plan. The conspiracy had overt acts in which they transported certain stolen property. And they're saying that all of this stuff should be forfeited. And if you can't, locate any of this stuff, the rest of this is just legal jargon. All submitted here. This is the information signed off on by Damian Williams. Okay, so all of this submitted. The 2 of them pled guilty to the charges, and the whole thing got wrapped up nice, quickly, and easily. Now, I tried to find a little bit more information about the actual defendants, the 2 people who were charged and pled guilty, and I was not able to find too much about them. Didn't see a whole lot about their background. If they are, politically aligned one way or the other, you would presume that maybe they're politically aligned with Trump, but maybe not, just because they found stuff that helped Trump, right? Trump might help them get money, but they may not necessarily be political activists. They may have just been somebody who came across something and they said, Trump would love this stuff. Joe was showering with his something, so they sent it over to him. Now, the big question, of course, is, all right, they pled guilty very quickly, very easily. It's almost like not even a big thing. They just show up. You did what you did, pled guilty, easy in and out. Why? Well, because they don't really care about them. They're not all that interested in Amy and Robert or what mama's bringing to papa, okay? Or whatever, they're doing over there. Good for them. They sound like they're having a lot of fun. But the New York Times is really hinting about where this is going. They say after the Florida pair pleads guilty in the theft of the daughter's diary, they're now concerned that they're asking questions about how the diary ended up in the hands of the conservative group Project Veritas near the end of the campaign. So you can see where this is going. They write, federal prosecutors presented new evidence on Thursday implicating the conservative group Project Veritas in the theft of a diary and items belonging to Ashley Biden. Says President Biden's daughter laying out in the court papers their fullest account yet of how allies of President Trump tried to use the diary to undercut Mr. Biden in the final days of the campaign. Court papers show it here. They say prosecutors directly tied Project Veritas to the theft of Mr. Biden's items in the court papers, saying that an employee for the group had directed the defendants to steal additional items to authenticate the diary. Right? So you can see exactly where this is going. They're saying that, Project Veritas and James O'Keefe and others are responsible for this criminality by sort of encouraging it, almost endorsing it. And they give us their ages a little bit. Miss Harris, age 40. Mr. Kurlander, age 58. And, they are still going to be awaiting sentencing, so we don't know what their penalties will be. But I'm going to guess they're going to be pretty low because both of them, I'm very sure, have agreed to testify against whatever the government needs. They'll be probably very useful witnesses as the inquiry against Project Veritas and, other sort of enemies of the regime continue to come under their microscope. And so we'll continue to follow that. I'm sure that James O'Keefe and his team are well prepared for this, and they're already communicating with prosecutors and the DOJ. And so we'll, of course, continue to follow that one. Moving to another Biden family member, another very wild couple stories today that we're getting into. Hunter Biden and Ron Johnson, and then Mark Zuckerberg over hanging out with Joe Rogan talking about Hunter Biden. All right, so we'll get into it. Whistleblowers from the FBI are now telling a U.S. senator that the FBI may have tried to impact the election by kind of fluffing around certain stories, let's say, by minimizing them so that maybe they are not elevated at the forefront and the fore minds of everybody throughout America. Whistleblowers, Hunter Biden, and FBI agents are going over to Senator Ron Johnson, and they are saying the following. Here is the letter that came out. Let me pull this letter up. And I have it drafted here. Yeah, here it is. Here it is. Okay. On August 23rd, 2022, a letter came out from Senator Ron Johnson, sending it over to Inspector General Horowitz. And you can see that the Inspector General has been investigating a lot of this sort of these problems with the FBI for years now. And Ron Johnson says the following. He says, all right, dear Mr. Inspector, he says, whistleblowers have recently contacted my office to share serious concerns about the FBI and their handling of the Hunter Biden laptop. These new allegations provide even more evidence of FBI corruption and renew calls for you to take immediate steps to investigate the actions regarding the laptop. He writes, in October 2022, remember in the months leading up until the election, I called on the FBI to explain what actions it took after reviewing the laptop. And he actually references this letter. Ron Johnson, Chairman, Homeland Security, sent this letter October 17th, 2020. Elections coming up in November. All of this stuff is floating all over the place. We covered many of the Hunter Biden stories here. Tony Bobulinski and others. Ron Johnson says, I sent you a letter and the FBI failed to respond to my questions. And I led the call for you to examine whether the FBI took appropriate and necessary steps after receiving the laptop. 4 months later, after the election in February 2021, you informed me that your office would not take any actions that would interfere with your ongoing investigation, which is the same garbage litany we've heard about for years now. So they respond back. They say, Dear Senator, in December, Hunter Biden publicly stated that the Delaware U.S. Attorney's Office advised his counsel that they're investigating tax issues. Earlier this month, the department announced that the U.S. Attorney in Delaware was one of 2 U.S. attorneys to remain in his role. And in light of these circumstances, we're not going to take actions that could interfere with the ongoing investigation. Okay, this is coming from the OIG now. And he says, okay, since then, whistleblowers, this is Ron Johnson writing, have come to my office alleging that FBI officials intentionally undermine efforts to investigate Hunter. And recently, my office heard from individuals with knowledge of the FBI's apparent corruption. After the FBI obtained the Hunter Biden laptop from a computer shop, these whistleblowers stated that local FBI leaders told employees, quote, you will not look at that Hunter Biden laptop, and that the FBI is, quote, not going to change the outcome of the election again. Further, these whistleblowers allege that the FBI did not begin to examine the contents of the laptop until after the presidential election, potentially a year after the FBI obtained the laptop in December 2019. And that's just amazing. While I understand your hesitation to investigate a matter that may be related to an ongoing investigation, Ron Johnson says, it's clear to me based on numerous credible whistleblower disclosures that the FBI cannot be trusted with the handling of the Hunter Biden laptop. I hope you understand that your office stands on the sidelines, and that the longer your office stands on the sidelines and delays investigating the FBI's actions, the harder it will be for you to uncover the truth and to hold individuals accountable for the wrongdoing. I call on you to immediately investigate the FBI's handling of Hunter Biden's laptop and begin by obtaining the history of the investigative actions taken by the FBI on Hunter's laptop, which should be available in the FBI case management system, Sentinel. Yeah, we'll see. The case file should provide valuable information about the steps that the FBI took to examine the laptop. And Ron Johnson writes, the American people deserve transparency and they expect allegations of government corruption to be fully and immediately investigated. Thank you for your attention to this matter and this very important request. There's a whole list of enclosures here, right? You remember this letter from October 17th? This is the one that Ron Johnson was referencing. He said, hey, dear Christopher Wray, know that there's a lot of issues that are pending around here, but as the FBI director, do you possess material from Hunter's laptop? I think we read through this one maybe exactly back then in October, 2 years ago. Is it accurate that the FBI officials obtained contents from the laptop? And if so, when did you first get those records? And what did you conclude in its examination of those records? And, if the president's son is committing crimes, maybe that might be something that's useful to America. You are the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Did you investigate him? Was there criminality? Are you covering it up? We need to know these things. And so this is just the first of the enclosures. There was another letter on October 21st. This one also went over to Inspector General Horowitz. He says, I asked the FBI a number of questions. Their answers are not satisfactory. Reports indicate that the FBI does possess the laptop belonging to Hunter, and the public has a right to know about this stuff. And of course, nothing happened. Back then, he was copying William Barr and Christopher Wray, but not much happened there. He sent a letter on, this one came back from Michael Horowitz saying, I'm writing in response. After receiving your letter, we informed you that we're not going to be discussing any of this. Why? Because it's an ongoing investigation, right? So all of these letters went back and forth. The intelligence communities, the DOJ, everybody over there just sort of sat on it because, well, it served their political interest. It served the narrative. Joe Biden ended up winning the election. And we're asking ourselves if people were putting their fingers on the scales, right? If FBI was burying stories or not able to look at certain, you can't look at this. You can't investigate this. You can't even report on this. Does that shift how people would have voted? Would it have changed things? Don't know, but it's a very interesting conversation that's being had in many places around the country, including on the Joe Rogan show. Here, Mark Zuckerberg was on. Mediaite has a synopsis of what happened here. I was going to play the clip, but it's a long clip, so I'll just read you some of the highlights. But Mediaite reports Mark Zuckerberg is telling us that the FBI came to Facebook warning of Russia propaganda on the Hunter Biden story. He said that when he was sitting down with Joe Rogan, Rogan asked him how Facebook handles controversial news topics. And Mark Zuckerberg came out and he says, well, so we took a different path than Twitter did. Basically, the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us. Some folks on our team, and when they were like, hey, just so you know, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of a dump of, something that's similar to that. So just be vigilant, says Mark Zuckerberg. So he says our protocol on Facebook is different than Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said, well, you can't share this at all. And remember, we were talking about this, screaming from the rooftops about the censorship taking place in the middle of an election on a national story involving a candidate's son, censored in America. And that Twitter censored it outright. And Zuckerberg told Rogan, he says, well, we didn't do that. He says, if something's reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation. We also use this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false, he said. He said, I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false. He says the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could share it. You could still consume it, he said. And Rogan pushed back. He said, well, what do you mean about decreased distribution? What does that mean? Zuckerberg explained that the story appeared lower on news feeds to what he said was a, quote, meaningful degree. And I'd encourage you to watch this. I'm going to listen to the whole thing because I want to see what he had to say. But when I watched the clip, he said meaningful. Yeah, I mean, he says, like, yeah, it was meaningful. Like, yeah, we diminished it. Like, yeah, it was pretty meaningful. Right? They buried the story. He says, we weren't sort of as black and white about it as Twitter was. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the FBI, which, you know, I still view as a legitimate institution in this country, says it's a very professional law enforcement. He says, they come to us and they tell us that we need to be on guard about something. Then I'm going to take that seriously, Zuckerberg said. Rogan said, well, okay, well, I mean, did they ask specifically? Did they say you need to be on guard about that story? Zuckerberg says, I don't remember if it was that specifically, but it basically fit the pattern. And then Rogan flips the conversation asking about the aftermath of Hunter. He says, you know, Hunter, it turned out to be pretty factual, idiot. And Zuckerberg says, yeah, I mean, it sucks. I mean, yeah, it turned out after the fact. Yeah, it sucks. I'm sure he's really remorseful. I mean, the fact checkers looked into it. No one was able to say it was false, right? So basically, I had this period where it was getting less distribution. I think it sucks, though. I think in the same way that probably having to go through like a criminal trial, but being proven innocent in the end sucks. Like, it still sucks that you had to go through a trial, but at the end, you're free. What? Oh, God, I can't wait to listen to this guy. I don't know if the answers would have been don't do anything or don't have any process. I think the process was pretty reasonable, you know. We still let people share it, but obviously you don't want situations like that, he concluded. Yeah, it's pretty reasonable if you win, right? If your team wins because you tip the scales. Oh, my gosh. Mark Zuckerberg, right? He also funded through the CFCL, the Chan Zuckerberg Alliance, whatever, right? All sorts of different election efforts throughout this country. And we covered a lot of it. And so that, my friends, is it for the segments on the show. We did cover a lot of ground today. We've got the Trump warrant. The affidavit was ordered, unsealed. Let's do a quick refresh on the docket just to make, you know, I'd hate to get out of here and just, you know, not do a refresh. So there it is. Let's see. Anything new? No! Nothing new. All right. So that's all right. That means that we're going to talk to you, my friends, and see what you have to say, because there were some super chats that came in, and then we've got our friends over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com that we do, of course, have to check in with. I see Savvy Sue's over there. Zach Nichols is in the house. Tweak is there. Zach Nichols, JC the Music Man, Jason on Blast, all chatting away. And let's see what came in on YouTube here today. John McGarvey started us off here talking about the affidavit. He said, I heard that they're going to use this document to show support for BLM with a black box. It's all going to be redacted. Maybe if it's like redacted in a fist or something, like if a paragraph looks like a fist kind of a thing, maybe you could say that. Wolfgang Deo says, Hosanna. No, say it louder. Hosanna. Thank you, Wolfgang Deo. I said it. Patrick Parker is here. He says, I'm sorry to say, but I think this is quite pathetic that the FBI and the DOJ tried to cover this up. And they're blaming it on Trump. I think you said maybe tried to cover this up. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, the FBI is a pretty shocking entity in recent era. Yes. Good to see you, Patrick. Thank you for the support on that one. Don Schuler says, who are you and what have you done with the other Robert? I take an extended hiatus from the internet and my sanity just to come back and see that China has replaced my favorite YouTuber. Gouveia is my mother's name. It's actually Portuguese, and it's something that, you know, I decided was the right name. You know, Don, I was sort of mislabeled, and I corrected that. You're allowed to do that these days. And it's only a name, right? I didn't change anything else. It's not even a big deal these days. But thanks for asking about it. Yeah. And I did that at the turn of the year, Don. So where the heck you been, man? It's like 9 months coming up. I did that on January 1st. But Don, welcome back. Hopefully you've got a lot of sanity. I mean, yeah, you do have to unplug. 8 months of sanity. Grateful that you're back. Patrick Parker. I saw Patrick Parker. And we also had Dapper Dave coming in. Dapper Dave says, in regards to the diary case, the charges sound like something you might charge for stealing Trump's passport. Yeah, it does, right? Yeah, they went into his and Melania's underwear. That too. They took hers too. Yeah. Also, looking forward to the one sentence affidavit with everything else being redacted. I know it's going to be hilarious. It's going to say in the Southern District of Florida, affidavit, all redacted, signed, redacted, special agent FBI. Are you looking forward to that? It'll be the shortest show ever. I'll have a whole show prepped for it. It'll release. I'll be like, oh. Okay, well, that was about 2 minutes. Thanks for swinging by. Good to see you, Dapper Dave. Looking forward to the one sentence affidavit. Paul Mino is here. He says, how did your BJJ session go? New channel ready. No, new channel's not ready yet. My gosh, Paul, it was good, brother. I thought I was in better shape than I was. I got to be honest with you. I was in tunnel vision mode. You go out there, it's like 30 minutes in, tunnel vision. It's a really great session. It's a new club, right? A bunch of new guys, and I am probably going to go back. I have to sort of fit it in with everything, but it was great. There's something super special about the mats, and I really did miss it pretty badly. I don't have a lot of gi experience, so Paul, I actually sort of was a wrestler and then a mixed martial arts in college, sort of in a club, but there was very little gi work that I had. And so on Monday when I went, I sort of remember, they had an extra gi, I put it on. I was like, man, these things, it's a whole different game with the chokes and everything. So I had to, look, I got a bruise from it. That was my bruise from I think that was from, when did I go? Monday, Tuesday, whenever I went, right? It's good to get back out there, and a lot of fun. The humbleness and the camaraderie and the sort of mutual respect that exists in those rooms, unless you feel it, there's really nowhere else to get it. So thanks for asking about it, Paul. Super fun. And I'm probably, so I have a couple, there's another gym that I'm looking at, and then there's something I think I've told you about where at the YMCA sort of down the street, there's another sort of group project sort of thing that I'm working on. But regardless, one way or the other, it's one of the best things that you can do. It's just really, really amazing. All right, and thanks, Paul, for that one. Let's go check out what's happening over on Locals here. Doing a quick refresh on this one. Locals is in the house. We have first up from Kenny Cole. He says, Rob, sometimes I wonder if this isn't all strategic. I know people who've never even been a little bit political. They're now all plugged into all of this nonsense. Says Trump can take the heat and keep the focus on him until 2024, then swing everyone behind his pick for president. Media won't have enough time to form a delusional NPCs before the 2024 election. And if they try, it's going to wake up even more normies to the commie nature of 90% of corporate media. I don't know. I don't know how this is going to go. There's going to be a lot, if there's 20 million people who all have $10,000 put in their pocket by Joe Biden, that's kind of a hard thing to overcome. But I also think that the equivalent outrage from people who say, why are they getting paid when I'm not getting paid, is enough to maybe tip the balance back the other way. Former LEO says, I can't wait until reality sinks in and they find out that the excused student debt must be claimed as earned income to the IRS when filing their taxes. That's a good point, Former. I don't know if they factor that in there, right? That's like a $10,000 tax bill. You just got $10,000 of earned income. This could very well be the October surprise to drop in the Democrats. I think that they'll probably write that one out. They'll sort of make sure that they don't get hit with that. Because, yeah, well, we'll see. It's a good point, though, with former LEO. TOS Forever says, thought-filled Thursday to Watching the Watchers and to Rob. Shout out to TOS. Sergeant Bob says, FBI interference in the government, media, and the politics is part of the FBI culture from the Hoover days. It is obviously still alive and well, as sick as it is. Heather says, tell me you don't trust the government and the judge without telling me you don't trust the government or the judge. The media is all over this. Yeah. Yeah. The media is all over this. Yes. I think I see your point, Heather. Yeah. It's going to be fun to watch this one play out. It's weird because you're not used to the dynamic between, like, the media is sort of in alignment with Trump's interests. And that's not always the case, except they are always aligned in talking about Trump. Trump loves to talk about Trump, and the media loves to talk about Trump. And they're both getting to do that. Shout out to the youngest girlie. Sergeant Bob says, Obama is running the White House. It is an obvious continuation of his 8-year agenda to reimagine the USA. Also says, eventually, will the precedent set by the Judge Berman in the Clinton case prevail in this case? Courts are all about precedent. Well, it's a good question there, Sergeant Bob. It's a different district. So they're in the Florida district. In the Clinton case, it's the D.C. Circuit. So, I don't know if there's a circuit split, but they are different. So not necessarily. In other words, the Florida is not bound by the D.C. precedent. But if there's a higher, like if the Supreme Court has some case law on this issue, or if they decide the issue, then yeah, they'll unify any divisions amongst the circuits. Three Girlie says, if they pled guilty, could that mean that Project Veritas can be charged with receiving stolen property? I think that's where they're going with that. Yeah, I think they're trying to make that argument. Now, as I said, you have all sorts of First Amendment protections as a journalistic entity. Like, for example, remember we talked about who was the guy? I can't remember his name. John Sullivan, something or other. He was one of he sold his J6 footage to CNN for like $70,000. Remember that guy? And, they didn't indict anybody. I don't even think they indicted him with anything because of journalistic stuff. So you got to go back to intent and, did they know it was stolen or, all sorts of certain things. But listen, Heather, that doesn't stop them from doing anything in this DOJ. So yeah, can they be charged? Even if they couldn't, they probably would be. So, and I think they could. Here it's another one from former says, by them taking a plea deal for theft of lost property, does it make the contents unavailable for the press or Project Veritas? No, them pleading guilty doesn't have an impact either way. I mean, it's not theirs. Like, it's Ashley's property, right? So she has the privacy rights attached to it. The plea deal was to establish a crime and prevent the disclosure of the contents. Probably the sweetest plea deal ever. I agree. And how can the prosecution? Well, we don't know yet because they haven't been sentenced yet, but it's probably going to be pretty sweet because they're probably going to turn on the organization. How can the prosecution prove that Veritas had knowledge that it was stolen? Well, yeah, Three Girlie says ignorance isn't an excuse. Prosecutors are going to make the case. It doesn't matter. And if you remember, right, in the information itself, let's pull that back up. I think I still have that here. Damian Williams. Yeah, so this was the part. Remember there was a whole section in here where they're actually talking about it. Yeah, so text messages between them and the organization. Okay, we're taking huge risks. We're stealing stuff. This isn't fair. Pay us more money. Right, and all of that. Robert Kurlander repeatedly informed them, so it's all sort of in here that they're sort of knowing that this stuff was stolen. They're making that claim, whether a jury buys it or not. But I mean, look, if they charge them out of the Southern District of New York, yeah, they'll probably buy it. Heather says, I've seen tons of people sent to jail for receiving stolen property that didn't even know it was stolen. Yeah, because if you make that argument, everybody would say, like, if that was the only defense, if that defense worked, everybody who had stolen property would say, no, I have no idea. All these car stereos? Well, that's weird. I don't know why they're in my trunk. It's the weirdest thing in the world. I don't know how they got there. Oh, well, I guess you're innocent. Then go free, right? So that excuse is not work. It would be nice if it did. My job would be a lot easier. NY Renal MD would say, as far as I heard, Biden's daughter was staying at an addiction group, sober home living. Oh, sober living. That makes sense. I thought it was like an Airbnb situation. Just like Hunter Biden left his laptop behind. Project Veritas never used the diary and returned it to Biden's representative. After paying money, they got the thanks of an FBI raid. Yeah. How is it stolen if she left the items behind? Well, yeah, they're going to say that it was... Now you get into property rights and somebody holding something in trust for other people and rights and privileges and all of that stuff. Here, this comes in from Facts Matter, says Nancy Pelosi leading the charge for the Biden administration to forgive bar tabs. Yeah, once the student loans are out, I mean, what's next? Bar tabs and, I don't know, hookers probably coming up next. What's Paul Pelosi into? Who knows? Don't want to know. Jeff Rook says, hogwash. How dare you claim Pelosi would be poor enough to require such a request, from Jeff. Here's Miss Lucky and Sergeant Bob says, if I were ever doing an illegal deal and discussions would be by both parties totally naked in a steam room. That's a good idea. Steam room. That's a good one. Never use any media, email, phone, or anything. Everything is recoverable. That said, no sympathy for any of Sleepy Joe's crime family. Good to see you, Sergeant Bob. Thunder 7 says, Project Veritas did not publish it, probably because they knew the contents were so damaging that they would likely take out James. He gave it to the police November after the election. It was published by the National File where many people read it, but it was completely ignored by the fake news. They just like they ignored the laptop. Once again, rules don't apply to the Dems, but at least now the truth is dripping out. By the time of the midterms, I'm sure that the whole country will know a lot more about everything, and that is terrible news for the Dems. Well, we're doing our part here to talk about it. Jeff Rook says, as a lawyer, you would naturally understand DUI law as well as you do constitutional law, naturally. Do you have an opinion on this student loan forgiveness? Well, yeah, Jeff, we talked all about that yesterday, so I'd refer you to that show. I was generally against it, right? Sort of as a general rule. I still have a lot of questions about the implementation of this, but I mean, I'd refer you to the whole show because we went through basically everything on it, and we actually did a deep dive on the origination source of the power. Okay, this is where I have a lot of these issues with this. Where does Joe Biden get the authority to do this? We went through it. The HEROES Act, he's trying to use the pandemic on the back of the HEROES Act in order to justify an ongoing emergency to deal with the consequences of COVID, which he said was over elsewhere. And so there's no legal basis for this. And so I'm outraged about it. I mean, if you want to synthesize the whole thing, but I only have so much outrage to go around, so I save a lot of that for other topics. But yeah, I'm outraged about a lot of things. Here, then again, he says, do you have an opinion on it? He says, based on my understanding on the spirit of the law regarding branch power, I can't believe it passes the sniff test. Then again, it's recently felt like the gap between the law and the spirit of the law has grown into an endless chasm. Yeah, the spirit of the law is kind of garbage, right? It's garbage. It's kind of ridiculous. And it's what many people on the left use in order to effectuate whatever they want. They just say, well, I mean, the Constitution says that, but that's kind of not what it meant, or that's what it meant to a bunch of white guys in the 1700s. And what the spirit of the law means, I can get so fired up on this topic, but Jeff, this is the living, breathing constitutional argument that exists at the foundation of a lot of legal analysis. And this is even the bifurcation between the two wings on the Supreme Court. Textualists, people who say, what does the law say? The law means what the law says, versus other people on the left who say, well, it kind of whatever it means, kind of whatever it should mean. And we saw this with the COVID litany of cases. All of those, many lefty judges, one after the other, said, yeah, that's a questionable provision to prevent people from, property rights, but COVID's really bad, right? In other words, the law doesn't matter. The circumstances matter. The circumstances of the pandemic were so bad and dangerous that the law is not even that relevant. We can just sort of paper over it because we have to, because of the context. No, you can't run a society like that. You've got to actually have laws that you follow. And Joe Biden coming out, I think it's unconstitutional, right? I don't even know how it's going to be implemented. There's going to be a million lawsuits filed. But what happens now if the government starts accepting requests from people and starts doling out money, and then it becomes unconstitutional? Again, they don't care about any of this. It really is a shocking thing. If Trump did any of this stuff, people would be screaming at him for wrecking the constitutional framework of America. But Joe Biden, he makes efforts. He does things that he knows are unconstitutional. And even when the court does smack them down, he's already implemented a lot of the policy and gotten a lot of the juice out of the squeeze. Sergeant Bob writes, allegations of FBI corruption is not amazing to me. It's been going on for years. As retired law enforcement, I do not say that lightly. Good to see some FBI folk or whistleblowers and standing. We should not use too broad a brush. It's true. Zach Nichols says, is it just me, or are you also getting the feeling that the redacted release is going to be about as transparent as a Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition magazine? Probably. I think I know where you're going with that, Zach, right? Because they're covering up all the parts that many people really want to see. Thunder 7 says, Rob, not the FBI's job to make assumptions about how people will vote in light of possible criminal activity. But it's obvious that it's more than that. They wouldn't have hesitated to reveal the contents if it was one of Trump's kids. They're clearly working on behalf of the Dems. Not everyone, obviously, but many in supervisory roles. It's very sad, once again, to know that there are two tiers of justice. But we've known that for decades. Time to gut the FBI and keep some parts and discard the rest. Everything is political, from Thunder 7. Jason says, Rob, have a good one. You too, Jason. Miss Lucky says, Sergeant Bob, most judges are politicians. End of story. Yeah, many are. I mean, in Arizona, many of them are elected. Like, you run for office. You don't even have to go to law school or be a licensed lawyer in Arizona. Just run for office. C. Reed is in the house. Shout out to C. Reed. He says, Idiocracy movie was not meant to be a documentary. Make 1984 fiction again. Says, watching friends and family choking down red pills as the apocalypse dawns. Yes, it's what's the guy's name from the Candy movie? What's his name? Willy Wonka, right? Oh, yes. Eat those red pills. Yes, love that, C. Reed. Former LEO says, Sergeant Bob, don't forget a body cavity search. All right, I don't know what the cops are talking about in here. Jeremy says, Rob, I used to do enough cardio to run half marathons. I used to belong to the Reading Judo and Jiu-Jitsu Academy and earned several belts. Man, I have the utmost respect for it. It's a lot. I never started sucking wind more than when I began rolling on the mat with people above my skill level. I hope to one day get my body strong enough to go back. It can be very rewarding to learn the skills of self-defense and the camaraderie that comes with the practicing of others. I'm glad you were able to get out on the mat again. The most important skill I learned from my instructors is to conserve your energy by using your opponent's force applied and their weight against them. You will last longer. Yeah, it's a very good advice from Jeremy. You know, that's a huge part of the whole sport. It's sort of managing your energy because, when I was young and even on Brazilian, even currently, your body sort of reacts and you can really expend a lot of energy unnecessarily if you're fighting certain things in a way that you don't need to fight. And so, it's a beautiful sport. And there's this brotherly love type of relationship that exists because you know that you could almost kill each other and you don't. And you're total strangers. It's the weirdest thing. I never met you. Please don't kill me. And he says the same thing to you. Okay, I won't kill you. Just tap. Okay, tap. Okay, don't. Okay. And you both just get back up and you go home that night. It's a beautiful thing. It's one of the most incredible things ever. All right. And so that is from Jeremy. And Jeremy, I know you're in a lot of back pain, brother. And I know you've got a lot of, you served our country and, you're not getting a lot of the treatment that you need. And I know that you're in pain sometimes. I feel that pain as well. I just want to say shout out to you, Jeremy. Hang in there, brother. I'd love to see you back on the mats too. And I really appreciate you being here and you sharing that with us. All right. And we had a couple others come in. On YouTube, K Bean says, legit bruises from BJJ. Rob, I salute you. Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, it's good stuff. I got some raspberries here, I think from the gi. I got some, it's all love. It's all good stuff. Curtis Bartle says, this is for the great mods and the best reporting. We really do have the best mods. I mean, in the whole stinking YouTube verse, no doubt about it. Shout outs to Just Causes in the house. K Bean playing hooky. I see Paul Minot is over there. Paul says, you won't be wrong if you point to, some other good stuff. Just Cause is in the house. Shout out to Just Cause and others. Just an amazing group of people over there. All right. And Jessica Mai is here, says, the $10,000 is nothing on the large loans. Most of us were promised forgiveness at 10 years, working in low-income communities, teachers, cops, social workers, etc., only for people under 125,000. I know. I mean, honestly, right? Because loans have been just expanding, right? Once the government said, we'll foot the bill for this, we talked a lot about this yesterday, then there's no upper limit to what the schools will charge. And so it just keeps inflating and inflating and inflating. And now, you've got tuition and room and board. And yes, you can come here. And it's almost just like free money that the government backs. They'll charge whatever you want, and they're doling out the loans like Skittles. And look, when I was in law school, there was and college, right? There were a lot of people there who were not taking it seriously at all. It was just like a country club. And I asked myself a lot, what are those people going to do when the real world hits them in the face? And I think we're seeing a lot of that reality, unfortunately. And, I don't know ultimately what the answer is. I do know that throwing a bunch of money at it without fixing any of the underlying problem or the underlying framework with our educational system doesn't feel like a good solution. The boat is still sinking. You got to plug the hole before you start bailing out the water, right? I think. I don't know how America works anymore. All right, we're doing a quick refresh over on locals before we wrap it up for the day. Let's see what we have here. Miss Lucky Sergeant Bob says, shout out to you, Rob. Great job on all counts sitting in BC and back to the USA on Sunday. Well, fly safely, Sergeant Bob and Miss Lucky. Big trip back, but we hope you have a nice, easy flight. Thunder 7 says they can never release the affidavit because then they won't be able to indict Trump, and that's coming very soon. Well, they're going to have to release something. And that's going to be tomorrow by noon. And so we'll have to see if that comes up maybe before our morning walk and talk. Otherwise, we'll certainly be talking about it on the show. But that, my friends, is it for us for the day. And I want to thank you for being a part of the show. We covered a lot of ground today. Trump affidavit ordered unsealed. We checked in with what he had to say on True Social, checked in on the docket, read the judge's order, listened to Tom Fitton and others. We learned about Ashley Biden's diary. Apparently that thing's real. 2 people pled guilty to those charges. And now it looks like Project Veritas is in the crosshairs. We'll continue to cover that story, and I'm sure Project Veritas is going to have a lot to say about that. And then lastly, we talked about good old Hunter Biden and the FBI burying the story and Facebook putting their thumb on the story. We learned that from Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan. And my friends, I want to thank you for being a part of the program. Shout out to our friends over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, chatting away. Jason on blast. We've got John McGarvey. We have B Spec, Look 2G, Savvy Sue. JC is over there. Bonnie Speck, Happy Old Cat Lady. Over on Rumble, Dog Digger, Jasperkins. Anything's in the house. Member of the public is here. Jack Elia is here, along with Nexit 2020, Anything, Annie Get Your Gun, and others are all over there. We also have some amazing members who can click that join button right next to that red subscribe button. And we've got the Binger clip here. Now, Binger is now, you can actually throw Binger in there as a GIF. Is it working? Is Binger in there? There's Binger. All right, there he is. I'm going to send it in the YouTube chat. There's Binger. Now, Binger is saying right here, he's saying right this. Remember in his clips, this is when he's saying, watch this. He says, full metal jacket. Right there, right there. Here, it comes again. You had in your possession what you call a full metal jacket right there. Right? He said that over and over and over again. Very annoying individual. And I was right after that clip that the judge said, don't get brazen with me. And that was a really fun day. And so thank you to our members who are joining over there. I, of course, am a lawyer over at the R&R Law Group. We're a criminal defense law firm located in Scottsdale, Arizona. We have an amazing team of people who help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but beyond that in their lives. We have a very big mission to help people charged with any type of crime. Anything minor, traffic offenses, Old Town Scottsdale offenses, drug offenses, DUI offenses, ranging up to major felonies. We would love the opportunity to help. We have an entire team of people who are extremely talented to help people through these processes. 480-787-0394. We offer free case evaluations, and we really appreciate your referrals. They keep us busy. They keep us in business, and we need them. Thank you for keeping us doing the work that we love to do. Shout outs to our mods. Vientikis, K Bean is in the house. Just Cause, Lean, Playing Hooky, Ronnie Cole. New addition, Ronnie Cole, welcome. Zulu Zite and Geomancy Games, all modding down the fort. And I appreciate all of you. Jessica Mai says, they never paid them at 10 years as promised, 20 years in. From Jessica Mai. Yeah, so I think what Jessica is saying is that you're 20 years in and you haven't gotten your loans paid off after the 10-year. You should call somebody about that. I don't know if there's an 800 number or something like that, but I'd be at the front of the line. Whatever Joe Biden's new plan is, I'd be at the front of the line. Hey, 10,000, what? I've been working for 20 years. You got to discharge my entirety of my loans. But that's not legal advice because we can't do that here. But I would certainly be at the front of the Biden line. And thank you to our mods for modding down the fort. Shout outs to our Spotlight supporters who are supporting the show with a little bit extra oomph, a little extra love by joining at the Spotlight level over on YouTube or an equivalent amount over on Locals. I really do appreciate the financial support, everybody. And I want to share some screen real estate with you. So if you have a website you want to plug, or if you just, want to send some love over, you're going on the screen. We're sharing screen real estate because I'm grateful for you. But that, my friends, is it for us. And so we are going to be back tomorrow to do it all again. We're going to have a redaction document. I don't know if we're going to be able to read anything. Might be the shortest show ever, 2 minutes. Here's the document. Have a great night. Just kidding. We'll spend some time on it. There's going to be a lot to talk about. We will do it all again. Same time, same place, same location. I hope you have an amazing evening. You sleep very well. And I look forward to seeing you here tomorrow. Bye-bye, my friends.